when your face is before me. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. When I'm surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or know of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I will do is forever worship you. I can only imagine, yes, I can only imagine. When I'm surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or know of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Hey, I can only imagine. When I'm surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or know of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. Yes, I can only imagine. Jesus, I can only imagine. Hey, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Yes, I can only imagine. I can only imagine when all I will do is forever worship you. I can only imagine.
Thank you. That's awesome. I can't sing, so I find all singing awesome. Yeah. I'm going to invite you guys to do something for me. I want everyone to stand, actually. Just stand. Everyone, young, old, if you're breathing, stand. So just stand. Look around. Look around. Have a good look. All right, I'm going to ask everyone over the age of 30 to have a seat. Everyone else under the age of 30 remain standing. Now look around. This is your future. This is who we need to be empowering. This is who we need to be mentoring, encouraging, involving, and plugging into our church. This is who we need to hand off the baton to. Because if we don't, our churches are dying. This is our future. You may sit down. You want to know who I hate? Maybe hate's a really strong word. You want to know who I have a really hard time not hating? It's people who hurt my kids. I have 4 boys, twins that are 6 years old, a 9-year-old, and a 12-year-old. And I'll find myself getting mad at like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 12-year-olds because they mistreat my kids. And you know, the reality is that if you mistreat my kids, there's no point and really no reason in trying to make things right with me if you haven't made things right with my kids. I mean, you could come and give me money. You can sing my great name. You know, you can offer me songs, gift cards, apologies. But as long as you haven't made things right with my kids, there's no way. I just heard this about 3 weeks ago. My sons were telling me. So my second son, Samuel, he was born with a handicap. He was born with only 2 digits on his left hand. And we knew from the beginning that this would cause some tension as he interacts and develops friends because people won't understand. They won't understand this reality. And as he grows up, we knew that he would face bullying. We just know it. It's a part of life, and so we try to train him for this, and we try to anticipate it. And we try to coach him and give him ideas of what he can do when and if these scenarios come up. And so apparently he was at camp. He was at one of the camps that we have at ICC. And his older brother was there with him, and his older brother's friends are there with him. Now you have to understand, Sammy is my son, a very strong-willed, type A personality. David is very outspoken. That's my oldest son. Great personality, makes friends like no one else. And they have a lot of friends. And so they're there at camp. And this new kid, I guess, came up and was making fun of my son because of his handicap. To which, so I asked Sammy, I was like, Sammy, what did you do? And because I know what I would have done had I been there, and thank God I wasn't there, because I know what I would have wanted to do. And so I was like, what did you do? And Sammy's like, I tried to ignore him, Dad. I really did. And then he's like, but I didn't have to. And I was like, why? What happened? He's like, David stood up for me. He's like, and David's friend, who will go unnamed, stood up for me. I was like, really? I was like, what happened? Now I'm curious. And he's like, yeah, David's friend was just told this kid that was picking on me. He looked him straight in the eye and he said, hey, you better stop picking on my friend. Because you pick on him, you pick a fight with me. And I looked at Sammy, and my wife and I are hearing this story, and I'm like, man, it's like, I love that kid. I was like, because he stood up for one of my own. I was like, and you stand up for one of my own. You stand up for me. Just had to get that off my chest. We're talking about being irresistible. And the reality is that Jesus, when you look at Jesus, when you look at the person of Jesus and who he is, who he was, is, and who he is to come, Jesus, the person of Jesus, is just irresistible. He is phenomenal. He is irresistible. And perhaps the reasons that people are resisting the church is not because they're resisting Jesus, but because they're resisting us. And so we have to ask the question, what is it about us that makes us so resistible? And maybe some of the things and some of the reasons that people give for resisting our churches should be things that we as a church should be resisting as well. I mean, there is no reason why we should ever have to put up with church bullies. No reason whatsoever. Amen. Church bullies have no part and no business in our churches. Amen. They need to be confronted, they need to be dealt with, and they need to be brought back in, and shown what the gospel is supposed to do in their lives. But there's no business for that. People who criticize others shouldn't be in our churches. Churches are not here, and they're not established to tear people down. They're established to build people up. Yes. And perhaps the reason that people are resisting our churches and our environments is because we haven't done a good enough job resisting the things that we should be resisting. And instead of being for something, we consider ourselves a people that are just against everything else. But in the beginning, it was not so. Because when Jesus started this movement, because it was Jesus who started this, our church was irresistible. Our pioneers were so young and so advanced, way beyond their time, that they understood that our church was not just to be another denomination. Our church was to be a movement that would usher in the second coming of Jesus. And we understood this from the very beginning, but somewhere along the lines, we lost sight of this beautiful thing that was the Adventist movement, and we have just become an institutionalized church. And Jesus wants us to go back to what he began. He wants us to go back and reestablish and reaffirm and reignite that passion that should have been ours all along. That should have been here and that should still be here and that will usher in his second coming. Because Jesus is awesome. And he's irresistible. Towards the end of his ministry, if you have your Bibles, feel free to open them. Towards the end of his ministry, Jesus gathered his disciples, and he washes their feet, and he gives them this subtle reminder, which was very subtle, but it wasn't clear, and sometimes it's not clear to us. And he takes his disciples, and there they are in the upper room, and as they sit there, the 12 leaders, the 12 leaders that are about to inherit everything, they're there, they're the big shots, they've made it, and he sits there, and they're bickering. Are you going to wash my feet? No. Maybe Andrew should wash our feet. No, maybe John. Yeah, John's the youngest. He should wash our feet. Oh, no, so, the older one. Let's get the oldest one to wash our feet. And they're bickering and they're fighting. And Jesus, as he hears them interacting and he hears them fighting and bickering and going back and forth, he does what no leader was expected to do in that time. He takes off his outer robe, puts it down, wraps a towel around his waist, and he goes and washes their stinking feet. And we don't see it. When we do foot washing, it's like, oh, let me take that lint off your toe. Thank you for washing your feet this morning. And to be honest, a lot of us were like, man, it's foot washing. I better scrub my feet this morning. Like someone's gonna do this. But it was not so back then. I mean, they were walking. They didn't have sewage systems like we have today. When people did stuff, they just threw it out the window. And so the disciples are walking along this manure stinking places and streets and roads. And here we are, the creator of the universe, who dares to take off his outer robe and dares to tell his disciples, not in my kingdom. In my kingdom, in my church, in my movement, we don't fight about who's on top. We fight about who's going to get down and serve. And so when you think you've made it, when you think you're the hot shot in your church, when you think you're the hot shot in your business, when you think you have made it because you have authority, because you have power, you better get that towel out and wash some stinking feet. Because your Lord and Master has done so to be an example for you. And then he takes them out of that room. Takes them out of that room, and they're walking along, and they're before they get to the vineyard, before they will get there, he stops and pauses all of his disciples as they're journeying through this, and he tells them something that's just radically different. It's so different. It's nothing they've ever heard before. It sounds familiar, but it's nothing they've ever heard before. We're in John chapter 13, verse 34. And he tells them this. And he says, hey, I'm going to give you a new command. A new commandment I give to you. And the disciples already, just like all of us, they're thinking in their mind, oh, okay, he's going to give us a new command. Okay, what is it, Jesus? Is it the one that you told the Pharisees, love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself? We got that. We took notes. Matthew wrote it down. He's going to write it down later in the gospel. We have it, Jesus. We got this. He's like, no. Don't get ahead of yourself. Just listen. Slow down and listen. I'm going to give you a new commandment. And I want you to love one another. Oh, yeah, Jesus, love one another, love our neighbors as ourselves. He's like, no. It's a little more complicated than that. It's a little harder than that because sometimes you don't love yourselves. So we're going to step it up a notch. I want you to love one another the same way I have loved you. In this way, you are to love one another. In the way I loved you. Have you guys ever had these conversations with people where sometimes it's your wife, sometimes it's your child? I know it happens to me now more with my children. Every now and then when I hold them, like this Friday, I picked up my kids from their last day of school, and it's my twins, and it's my third grade, my twins that are in kindergarten, my third grader and my fifth grader, and I pick them up and I give them a hug, and and those hugs are momentary time lapses of all the years I have given them hugs on their last day of school and even their first day of school. And as I hugged my twins, what flashed back in my mind was, I remember when you were born. I remember holding you in my hands. I remember you were so tiny, I had to feed you, and it seemed like you guys would take breaks in order to, one of you can entertain us all the time. And then I hugged my third grader, and I was like, man, I remember dropping you off on your first day of school. It was in Michigan. You had this little blue backpack on. You had a blue shirt, some black pants on, and I remember your shoes. They were shiny, and you were so proud. You were nicely combed to the side. Your shirt was blue and green. Like, I remember that day. And I remember the first day I dropped you off. Like, all these memories are flashing back in this quick moment. And my first son, when I hugged him, and I was like, hey, school's out. Come back. And I hugged him, and I was like, man, I remember when you were born. I remember how amazingly good-looking you were when you were born, and you're still so good-looking. And I was like, I remember bringing you home. I remember your first steps. I remember all these little memories in just a moment, in just a moment in a little hug. That's all it took. And I flashed back through all these memories. And I imagine as Jesus is sharing here with his disciples that he just gave them this new command, I imagine Jesus making eye contact with all of his disciples, and he looks them one by one, looks them right in the eye, and when he says, I want you to love one another the way I loved you, these disciples, they remember exactly how Jesus loved them. And so he looks at Matthew. He makes eye contact with Matthew. He's like, Matthew, I want you to love the rest of your brothers, the rest of my friends, the same way I loved you. Matthew, do you remember how I loved you? Matthew, do you remember when I met you? Do you remember what you were, Matthew? Matthew, you were a traitor to our nation. You betrayed your people, and everyone hated you. Matthew, you were collecting taxes from your own people, and no one wanted you. And as you sat there in the tax collector's booth and you saw me passing by, you wished that I would just turn and look at you and call you to something greater. And Matthew, what did I do? When all the other priests, when all the other pastors, when all the other teachers of the law, when they ignored you and thought of you less, Matthew, do you remember how I loved you? I didn't see you just for who you are. I saw you for what one day you will become. And so, Matthew, I called you. And Matthew, you'd made the best choice you would have ever made in your whole life. You left that tax collector's booth, and you came and you followed. So, Matthew, when I talk to you, and when I say, love one another as I have loved you, Matthew, I want all of you, I want Matthew and I want the rest of the disciples to know, this is how I treat traitors. This is how I treat outcasts in society. This is how I treat the people that the church leaders want nothing to do with. I call them and I bring them into my inner circle. Because while others see just the external features, I see what's inside, and I see the potential of what one day will be. And so I called you, Matthew. And by now, the other disciples are probably like nervous and they're shaking and they're like, man, he better not make eye contact with me because it's not pretty. And so he looks at Peter. He looks at Peter and he's like, Peter. And Peter's probably like, oh, great. Like, why, Jesus? It's like, Peter, do you remember that day? It's like, yeah, I was fishing. We hadn't caught anything all night. We tried all night. And you were walking by the Sea of Galilee, and you asked if you could come in my boat, and I said, sure, why not? And then you told me something. I was like, yeah, I remember. I told you to cast your net on the other side. And what happened, Peter? Well, we caught more than enough fish. And I knew that moment when we caught so many fish, I knew that divinity was standing right in front of me. And when people thought of me less just because I was a fisherman and because I had a fisherman's mouth, you saw past all that. And you empowered me. And you encouraged me. Jesus, I get it. I get it. When you say, love one another as I have loved you, you want me to treat others the way you treated me. I get it, Jesus. So I will treat bad-mouthed people in this world the same way you treated me. I will treat the uneducated in our society the same way you treated me. And I will love and extend mercy and patience the same way you were patient with me, because I have a big mouth, Jesus, if you haven't noticed. And I will treat big mouths and people who put their foot in their mouth because they speak before they think. I will treat them the same way you treated me, Jesus. I get it. I get what it means to love one another the way you love me. And then he looks at Philip. And he's like, Philip? Philip's like, oh, mercy. I remember that day, Jesus. He's like, Philip, you remember that day? He's like, oh, yeah. I wish we would never bring it up. And Jesus goes and talks to Philip, and he makes that eye conversation, that conversation that you have only with your eyes, the innermost parts of your being. And he tells Philip, Philip, do you remember what you thought of me? When that day when your brother Andrew went to call you? When he went, he was so excited. Your brother Andrew was so excited that he found me. So he goes up to your house, he runs to your house, and he knocks on the door, and you come out, you're like barely waking up, and you're like, wiping all the eye crusties off your face, and he's like, and your brother Andrew, he's so excited, he's pumped, and he tells you, hey, Philip, we found the one we have been looking for. We found the Messiah. And Philip, do you remember what you said? Do you remember? He said, you found the Messiah, and you're like, really, where? And you're like, his name is Jesus, and he's from Nazareth. And Philip, do you remember what you said? Philip's like, yeah, I remember. Do you remember how you viewed the people of Nazareth? Yeah, I remember. You remember what you said? Because I remember. You said, can anything good ever come from a ghetto town like Nazareth? And Philip, at that moment, you dissed my entire family. You dissed my mom. You dissed my dad. You dissed my brothers. You dissed me. And Philip, I didn't even try to get even with you. Because Philip, the issue with getting even with someone is that you become even with someone. That's the issue. And so I don't get even. Because there's no point in being even with someone that hurts you. So Philip, you remember what I told you? Like, yeah, I remember. You said, come and see. Come and see. And Philip, you came and you have seen. You have seen what God can do. You can see now what people from Nazareth can do. You can see that people from Nazareth have potential. You can see that we cannot call a certain town or a certain city or a certain village or a certain neighborhood ghetto. And we cannot place labels on these places. Because I call and God equips whom he wants to call. And so, Philip, when I tell you, and look at all the rest of you knuckleheads too, when I say love one another the way I have loved you, I'm telling you, you go into some of these towns. Because there is great potential there. Because those are my children that are in those towns. And they need to know about me just as much as you need to know about me. So this is what I mean when I say love one another the way I have loved you. And he goes through all of them. Thomas, Thomas, you've been doubting all this time. 3.5 years. I keep doing another miracle, and you're still like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's a trick. I don't know, Jesus. Maybe you had something up your sleeve. I don't know. And Thomas, you're gonna doubt in the next few days as well. But Thomas, I've always believed in you. When others began to doubt you, Thomas, I had faith in you. And that's why I called you. Because you are to bring your doubts to me, and I will get rid of your doubts. I want you to get to a place, Thomas, where you begin to doubt your very own doubts. Because that's the kind of God that I am. And he looks at James and he looks at John, and he's like, James and John, you guys need to learn how to calm down. There's a reason we call you sons of thunder, and it's not a positive thing. You guys get mad really easy. You guys explode like that time we were trying to go through Samaria to get to Jericho, and they didn't want to let me in, and you guys were like, hey, Jesus, great idea. Let's just burn this place to the ground. Let's demo it, and let's rebuild this town because they don't like you. And let's rebuild this place. And remember what I said? I said, no, let's think outside the box here. Let's not do that because they still need to hear about me. So James and John, when you think about loving one another the way I have loved you, learn to be patient with those who get angry. Learn to be patient and kind and loving towards those who are mean and quick-tempered. Because that's how you were, but that's not how you are going to be. That's not how you will be remembered. Today you may be known as sons of thunder, but pretty soon, John, you may not believe this. They're going to know you. The people 2,000 years from now are not going to remember you as the son of thunder. They're going to remember you as the one whom Jesus loved, the disciple of love. Because I have the power to change hearts. And I could change you from the inside out. And so when Jesus says, love one another the way I have loved you, this isn't Woodstock kind of love. This isn't just like, oh, let's just hug each other and sing Kumbaya and everything's cool. This is hard. And Jesus concludes this little section here, and he says, this, guys, this is how the world will know that you are my disciples. If you love one another the way I loved you. How you treat traitors, how you treat outcasts, how you treat hotheads, how you treat lowlives, how you treat murderers, because we didn't even talk about Simon. Simon the Zealot. Mercy. Who would ever call a murderer into his inner circle? Well, Jesus does that. If you guys don't know who a zealot was, zealots used to carry around a little dagger in their cloaks because they hated Romans so much. And when they would walk around town, if they saw a Roman soldier, they would just take the dagger out, shank him, put the dagger back in, and then walk away as if nothing happened. These were some bad guys. And Jesus is like, I can rehabilitate murderers. I could change their hearts. So this is how the world will know that you are my disciples. This is how they will associate you with me. How you treat traders, how you treat, people that are low educated, how you treat people that are poor, how you treat people that are from the ghetto, how you treat people that are hotheads within and without the church. Because we have this concept of the mission field being out there, but it starts in here as well. We need to have signs in our churches that say, welcome to the mission field, and it says it both ways, as you walk in and as you walk out. And if anything, it should say, welcome to the harder mission field as you walk in. Because we all need to pray for one another, trust me. Jesus is also working on us, and he needs to work on us. Because we need to become irresistible. Because we don't represent ourselves. We represent him who once called us. That's who we represent. I mean, wouldn't it be awesome? Wouldn't it be awesome if the only reason people gave for resisting our church, like when you invited your neighbor, like the reason he gave for not wanting to come to church was, I just don't like that you guys love Jesus too much. Like that. You guys just love way too much. I mean, wouldn't that be awesome? Like if that was the only reason that people gave for resisting the church was like, they just talk about Jesus so much and they just love too much. That's not the case. It's not the case at all. I mean, wouldn't it be awesome if people were skeptical about what we believe but envious about the way we lived? Where they would look at us and be like, I don't know about that whole Jesus resurrecting from the dead. Man, but I wish my wife would treat me the way those Adventist wives treat their husbands. Or I wish my husband would treat me the way those Adventist husbands treat their wives. And I don't know about, vegetarianism. I don't know about all that. I don't know about Aunt Ellen and whether she had visions or not. I don't know about that. But man, I sure wish my kids would be so kind like those Adventist kids in the community. And I don't know about, healthy eating because that's kind of hard for me because we're in the South and we fry everything, including ice cream. It's like, but I wish my boss was an Adventist. I wish my coworkers were Seventh-day Adventists. And this whole thing about worshiping on Saturday, like, it's weird, but I want it. People should be skeptical about what we do and what we practice and what we believe specifically. They should be envious about how we live and how we love and treat one another. People in our community should talk and share. Did you hear what these Adventists are doing? I mean, they fixed my neighbor's house, and they don't even know my neighbor. They just saw that it needed some help, and they came and they helped them out. I mean, did you hear what they did? So-and-so just had a baby, and they went and they dropped out a whole gift basket for them. And they coordinated help because this is a brand new single mom. And this is what the Adventists are doing. I don't know about what they believe, but I sure want to be part of that. Amen. Because when we get this right, our churches, our communities become irresistible. What's happening at Madison campus is pretty awesome. I have the honor and privilege of working with young adults and working with family ministries. And our young adults are phenomenal because they've captured the vision and mission of our church, that we are not just here to warm up a pew every Sabbath, but we are here to usher in the second coming. And people are going to know us by what we do and how we affect our community. And so I tell our young adults all the time, if our neighbors in our neighborhoods could just know us as a church who always helps them out, instead of, who are they? Then that's good for me. And so one of our young adults who's a PT, she was working with one of her patients when all of a sudden she overheard her patient saying, oh man, it's been so hard. This is my third time being in here because I fell down my stairs. And so our young adult was like, well, what happened? What do you mean you fell down your stairs? She's like, well, yeah, I have 3 or 4 steps to get down so I can get off my porch, out of my house, and into my car. And my legs aren't strong enough to climb steps anymore. And so our young adult's like, okay, would a ramp help? And she's like, a ramp would be awesome, but I can't afford it. To which our young adult said, don't worry. I know some friends. If you don't mind, I know this might sound a little intrusive and a little weird, but if you don't mind, do you mind giving me your address, and some of my friends and I can go and look? And before you get done with PT, before you go home, we want to have a ramp built for you so you don't have to fall down and you don't have to call an EMT to come and get you in and out of your house, because no one should have to do that. And so we went and we raised the money and we built it in 6 hours. And this lady doesn't come to our churches, but when she thinks about Seventh-day Adventists, she will remember us as the people who stepped up and built her a ramp to get in and out of her house. Go to Matthew real quick. Matthew 25. We're about to wrap up. Matthew 25, verse 31. This is talking about the end of time, everything. Jesus is coming back. And this is Jesus. This is him telling us. He's telling us this. So he says, verse 31, 25:31. He's Matthew. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on the right, but the goats on the left. And then the king will say to those on the right, come you who are blessed by my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. And all the righteous are like, did you feed him? I mean, did you feed him? I don't remember feeding him. Like, I don't remember ever feeding Jesus. I mean, did you feed Jesus? Do you remember that? It's like, no, I don't remember. Just listen, quiet. Jesus is talking. Just quiet. Let's listen. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something. Did you give him something to drink? No, I didn't give him something to drink. I don't know. I mean, I helped out at a soup kitchen once. I went and helped the homeless. And one time I saw someone, begging in the corner. I gave him something to drink, but it wasn't Jesus. It's just a person. Just a man or a woman or a child. I don't remember feeding him. I fed these other people, but not him. I fed that college student that was visiting from out of town, and they were looking for a place to eat. That's who I fed. Or I helped that single mom who was struggling with her finances because she couldn't afford, and her check couldn't extend that far. So I helped them out, but I don't remember helping Jesus. And he continues. He's like, I was a stranger and you welcomed me in. It's like, no, I welcomed Jesus into my heart, but I don't remember welcoming someone into my house. Like, Jesus never came into my house. I mean, some Adventist family was passing through. I remember them coming into my house, but not Jesus. I don't remember that. Did you do that? Did you do that? And people are whispering and murmuring, and he continues, and he's like, and I was naked, and you clothed me. Did you do that? I don't remember that. Did you? And then he goes on, and he's like, and then I was sick. I didn't know Jesus could get sick. It's like, and you visited me. I don't remember visiting Jesus in the hospital. I mean, I visited, my mom, my dad, my cousin, elder so-and-so. When they were sick, I went to pray for them, but I don't remember visiting Jesus. It's like, I was in prison. Jesus broke the law? It's like, I didn't know. He's like, I was in prison, and you came to me. Verse 37, then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or feed you, or thirsty or give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, and naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. Remember how I told you that if you hurt one of my kids, there's no point in trying to make things right with me? It finally clicked for me that this parable finally clicked for me about 2 years ago. Because we think Christianity and following Jesus is just about this vertical relationship. And we have privatized Christianity to say, this is my own personal walk with Jesus, and this is my own personal prayer time. But if there's no motion into your devotion is meaningless. And Jesus says this. He says, the wise man builds his house on the rock. The wise man does the things that he who listens to my teachings and does what it says is like a wise man, but he who listens only and doesn't do, he's like a foolish man. It's no good for us to come back Sabbath after Sabbath and hear great messages and do nothing about it. It's no good. It's no good to have such a holy relationship with God and know everything about Daniel and Revelations and be able to interpret everything. But if you're a jerk to your neighbor, it is no good. And this is what Jesus is talking about. We think that everything is right with God when we show up at church and when we offer him gifts and we offer him money and we sing him songs. But as long as we're hurting his children, he's looking down and he's saying, just make things right with my kids. Why are you singing me songs when you haven't even said sorry to the ones you hurt? Why are you trying to give me money? The whole world is mine. I don't need your money. I have more than enough. Tithing is not giving. Tithing is just called not stealing. Okay? We don't pay tithe. Okay? We pay employees. And God is not our employee. The tithe is already his. And we return it to him. And we give of our offerings. We have to get this concept out of our mind that like we are the owners. We are not the owners. We are but stewards. And he is the owner. So Jesus looks down, and here we are on our Sabbath best. And Jesus, this is the thing. The reason Jesus is so irresistible is because he changed this whole paradigm upside down. Because before, religion and religiosity and spirituality was just about the vertical. And Jesus steps into the scene, and he changes it, and he flips it around. And he's like, if you want the vertical, then you have to get the horizontal right. And if you don't believe me, turn real quick. But go back to Matthew 5. This is probably one of the most powerful things you'll ever see. So Matthew 5, Jesus talking about anger. Matthew 5, verse 21, he says, you have heard that it was said of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. And then he clinches it right here, verse 23. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there you remember that your brother has something against you, what does he say? Leave your gift there before the altar and go. What Jesus is saying is, God is fine. Okay, as you come into church and you're about to offer your tithes and your offerings and your songs and an hour and a half of worship Or, if you count Sabbath school as well, 2.5 hours, and you're about to offer that, and as you're about to walk through the front doors of church, you remember that you have something against your brother has something against you. Just stop. Just stop what you're doing. Go and make things right with your brother, with your wife, with your cousin, with your in-laws, whoever it is, with your neighbor. And then come and offer your gift to God. Because the concept we have to really wrap inside our minds, and we really have to get it, is that at the cross, Jesus established this very important principle, which is that he is for you. No longer do you have to fear what God thinks of you. He sent his son to die for you. Which means he is for you. He is cheering you on. He's got your back. He is on your side, and he wants you to trust him. And what he wants you to do is to make things right with your brother and your sister and your neighbor and your enemy. And that's hard. But that's what's going to make our churches irresistible. As I said, people should, and our neighbors should, be skeptical about the way we believe and what we believe. They should be envious about how we treat one another. Amen.